Hello.
Sir,
Hey, good morning, Ashish.
good morning. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Very good, sir. So I have enabled you to sharing the PPT and all.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't see this option here to share the PPT yet. At least I don't know. Let me just check. It's not showing. Ashish.
Sir, I have enabled.
I don't see it. I mean, he's talking, is recording. In fact, okay. Test speaker, audio settings. Are you able to see my video?
No, not yet.
Okay. No, I think that means you need to add me to something in the panel, I think,
Just hold on.
because I'm only seeing it as a participant. I'm not in the panelist.
Now, please see.
Now it's different. Yes.
Got it. So, but
Yes.
still I'm unable to see you.
I need to share my video. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, now
No,
perfect.
it's okay.
Good
No,
morning.
at least I didn't know how I was being seen, so I think this is good.
Yeah.
Cool. So sharing. Okay. I see some participants there. Is it all panelists or attendees so joined?
Till now, we two are the panelists and rest are attendees.
Okay.
And I'm just waiting for other panelists as well.
Okay. So
You
the
just
flow, I mean, you
Yeah.
have the PPT in case something
No, I
doesn't
don't think
go.
so. There will be any technical hitch. You just we can have a dry session right now. There are still 4 minutes remaining.
Yeah, sure. I'll just let me share the screen.
Yeah.
Give me like a minute. Share screen, and then I'll say share screen, and I'll say go to. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Please stop that. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Good morning, Mr. Kanan.
Good morning, Mr. Kumar.
How are you,
Good
sir?
morning, Shkana.
Fine, fine. How are you?
I'm good, sir.
Kumar, you are based where? Mumbai or Delhi?
Me? Delhi, sir. Morning, Dr. Bhattacharya. So you
Good
are on
morning,
mute.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Raj.
Yes,
morning.
sir. Good morning.
Good morning to all.
Just a moment, Ashish.
Yeah.
Am I audible, visible?
Yes, sir. Perfectly fine. You are
Yes.
audible, visible, both.
Yes.
Thank you, Ashish.
Yeah.
How are you guys?
Yeah. I'm good. Perfectly fine.
How are you, Srinath?
Hey, I'm doing perfectly fine, man. Saturday morning, fresh and ready to have a good session.
For me, Saturday morning is the start of a weekend.
So, Doctor, along with us, here is Mr. R. Kanan. He is from
Yeah.
Hinduja Group.
Yeah, nice meeting you. Yeah. Nice
And
meeting you,
Mr.
doctor.
Kanan,
Yeah.
where
right.
are you based out of?
Mumbai.
Mumbai, okay.
And yourself?
I am from Delhi.
Oh, Delhi. Okay. Most of you are from Delhi.
No, actually, he's from Bangalore, Srinath.
I'm from Bangalore, Mr. Kannan.
Okay.
So I basically belong to Calcutta, but now based out of Delhi.
So I'm just waiting for Mr. Mihir Mehta. He is about to join on panel, and there are 1 more minute remaining.
My audio is fine. Audio?
Yeah,
Audio
perfectly
is
fine, sir.
fine,
Perfectly fine.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ashish,
Yeah,
since I haven't had a chance to talk to you and also Mr. Kannan,
yeah,
I just wanted to ask you, today's topic is about financing a startup, right?
perfect. Yes.
So, while what I thought was that if Srinath gives us a brief of how to start an enterprise or entrepreneurship, and while the other two panelists focus on the financing part, what they look out for from an entrepreneur when it comes to funding, what are the expert tips that they give. So I thought that the flow would be a mix. It would be good if the flow is such a mix, if you guys agree to it.
Perfectly fine, sir. And I have also thought in same line, like I had discussed with Mr. Srinath as well, that his statement can be the opening statement for our coming session.
Yeah.
Which we are going to cover on social sector.
Yeah.
And simultaneously, the importance of Srinath ji, yesterday we had a long discussion in same regard.
Mm-hmm.
So we will follow the same as you are saying. No issues in that.
Great. And Mr. Kannan,
Yeah.
I have a long profile of yours. So when I introduce you, would you want me to emphasize on anything?
Just to finish it in 4 or 5 lines. I could have said to you, you want a five-liner?
Yes, please.
What is your ID? 1 minute.
My ID is r.bhattacharjee@timesgroup.com.
1 minute. Huh? Let me see whether it is coming now. R dot
BHA
ah
double TA
ah
CHARJEE
no at
at timesgroup.com.
let me see. I have a very short one. I'll try and forward you that.
I think Mihir has joined.
Hi, Mihir.
Hi, Rajesh. Hi, Srinath. Hi.
Good morning, Mr. Meher.
Hi, morning. I was not a panelist earlier. I think I joined, but I could not do much. So how's it going?
Yeah, it's going fine. So, Dr. Bhattacharjee, let's start.
Yeah. So let me wait for the profile 1 minute.
Okay.
I'm just 1 minute.
And till that,
Sorry, I would like to put out a disclaimer. I'm not. I think I fall a little on the sidelines with respect to my dressing, but it's a Saturday, so I've taken the liberty to be in my polo. I hope that is fine.
Oh, absolutely. You are the finance expert. You can wear anything.
As long as you give the money.
No, I attribute this to my Google days. So we used to say you can be serious without a suit. So I don't have blazers right now, but I do have one right here. But yeah, I think.
Oh, you're looking smart and fine.
Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you.
perfect. So I'll
The
take
disclaimer I have is today is my first time in moderating. So it's an accidental position that has been given to me today because Mr. Rohit is unavailable for some reason. Ashish, is Mr. Rohit joining?
No, not today.
So will you be introducing Whiteboard Labs?
Yes, exactly. And the frame which we are going to talk about, I'm just going to introduce. And I believe it's 11:03. Let's start.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have sent you. Yeah.
Good morning, all the panelists. And my name is Ashish on behalf of Whiteboard Labs. Rather than Whiteboard Labs, welcomes you all in respect and capacity of panelists as well as all the viewers. So today's frame is like the impact of an uninvited virus along with the artificial robots we created have led to a certainty of a new distinction of our profession and lifestyle. Rapid change will force business to restructure and make changes to retain their competitive advantage. Today, we are forced to look at new model of business and professions to survive. One such option can be form entrepreneurship, which we are going to talk today. which can use the knowledge and experience of an individual as a part of capital. Our panel today, each one a distinguished professional from their respective industries as well as entrepreneurs, will help us to understand this aspect and whether it is worth considering as an option. But at the same time, I'll introduce and welcome all my guests and will request to Dr. Bhattacharya, who is representing Times Foundation today. Over to you, Dr. Bhattacharya. Thank you so very much.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 5th series of our webinar. And we're coming to the technical side of this webinar where the interest is like building up even more. So I represent the Times Foundation, which is the philanthropic wing of the Times of India, one of the largest media houses of Southeast Asia, if not globally. I also am currently the corporate physician for the Times of India group nationally. So Times Foundation is like I told you, it's a philanthropic wing of Times of India. It's headed by our group chairman, Srimati Indu Jain. And we have a small team comprising of 8 people across India, but it's volunteered by the entire group. Times Foundation acts as a catalyst to most of the social enterprises and entrepreneurship, and we deal in social causes which are relevant to the cause and time. So I welcome all the panelists today. We have Mr. Srinath, Mr. R. Kannan, and Mr. Mihir Mehta. All of them very distinguished. I'll introduce them one by one. Just hold on a sec. I'll start by Mr. Srinath. Mr. Srinath Honavalli. Srinath is the co-founder and CEO of Travelo Healthcare, a healthcare tech startup working at the confluence of healthcare, education, and technology. He's responsible for the operations, finance, and strategy for the company. He's a computer science grad from NIT Trichy with a master's from Texas A&M University. He's also done his executive management course in healthcare from IIM Bangalore. Now, Mr. Srinath, he started his career at the Cisco Systems San Jose. He relocated to Cisco India to set up a small team. He worked as senior manager at Cisco and Hewlett Packard Enterprise before starting his entrepreneurial journey. So along with his classmate from NIT Trichy, he founded the Travelo Healthcare in 2018, focusing on school health program, Healthy Kid. Now, Srinath also has an experience of having several US patents in his name and would like to be known as a tech innovator, a good people manager, and a mentor. Well, he also says that he's happily married with 2 kids and lives in Bangalore. So welcome, Srinath.
Thanks a lot, Raj.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I also welcome Mr. Raja Kannan. Mr. R. Kannan is an expert in finance and strategy with more than 27 years of experience, and during his career as a management consultant and a key member of corporate headquarters in various corporate, including Hinduja Group, as a vice president and head of strategy, ICICI Bank as executive vice president strategy consultant in TCS. He carried out assignments relating to corporate finance, fundraising, treasury management, strategy formulation, implementation, organization, restructuring, and the list goes on. Presently, he's heading the performance management function at the group level in the Hinduja Group, dealing in aspects relating to planning and budgeting. So we have a very senior expert in finance whom we kind of ask a lot of questions today. Finally, we have Mr. Mihir Mehta. Mr. Mihir Mehta is a qualified chartered accountant and started his work career in at Google India as an accountant strategist. During his short stint at Google, Mihir worked with some of the world's largest companies in the travel industry. An entrepreneurial blend of mind and a passion to be in the financial services has propelled Mihir to build one of India's largest investment banking teams specializing in consumer healthcare and BFSI segments. Now, Mihir currently holds the distinction of being the youngest director on the board of Association of Investment Bankers of India. He also serves as the additional director of the board of the Body Kitchen, a leading food startup in India. Now, that is of interest to me, being a foodie. Now, I welcome you all on board. Thank you for coming on board and sharing your experiences. And so this webinar has been organized by Times Foundation and Whiteboard Labs. So Mr. Ashish is representing the Whiteboard Labs today. And I would request Mr. Ashish to give us a brief on Whiteboard Lab before we start our journey.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Rashi Bhattacharya. See, if we talk about Whiteboard Labs, I'll define only one line, that we are making bridge between industry and academia, fulfilling both side requirement in respect and regards Industry 4.0 skill programs. This is what exactly Whiteboard Labs is doing. And in the capacity of Vice President Whiteboard Labs, we welcome you all again as an panelist, as an viewer. Thank you so much, and be with us. Over to you, Dr. Bhattacharya.
Yeah. So let's start today. My first question is to Mr. Srinath Honavalli. Srinath has been a very dear friend of mine over the past 1 year. We've done a management course together. And during this course of journey, I understood his sharp bent of mind in creating new kind of enterprises, creating new ventures. And he's a pro at it. So Srinath, over to you. Please, could you start this webinar by introducing yourself and also introducing your organization? What made you feel, what is that urge that you had to start this organization? So if you could give us a brief from the scratch, what suddenly made you start a journey of your own?
Sure, Raj. Thanks a lot for the introduction. So I would say entrepreneurship is actually a mindset. It is just not that something happens overnight and then you just say, okay, I'm quitting my job and starting something. People do that, but that's very impulsive, and I would not suggest that, right? I mean, the reason I'm saying that is entrepreneurship is glamorized a lot in India as well as the entire world. And actually, it's a very hard journey. It takes a lot of effort, lot of sacrifice from yourself as well as from the families, etc. So from my side, if I were to talk about that, I mean, when I was in my +2, I had the option to go between healthcare and engineering. And my dad was a doctor, and then I had interest in both. But I said, okay, maybe engineering is my choice. I took that, right? But after having worked in the corporate industry for more than 20 years, I said, okay, what am I giving to the society? Yes, I'm developing products, I'm doing things, but where is that I'm actually bringing as an individual value to the society is what got me thinking. And so that's where I said, okay, can we do something in an area which is something close to the heart as well as can contribute to society? And both healthcare and education were two areas that are very close to me. And I thought, can I bring my technology background to the healthcare and education and see if we can do something in the school health area? So that's how the whole journey of the Healthy Kit started off. So currently we are in our third year of operation, and then we do health screening for school children. And the whole idea is, can we bring technology to bring personal health records and then ability to identify preventable diseases in school children and then intervene so that we are actually building a healthy nation. So that in a nutshell is what got me into the entrepreneurial journey. And it has been a pretty, I would say, adventurous journey till now. And every day is a new experience, and in that way, it's exciting.
So Srinath, as we all hear, that an entrepreneur starts either by accident or if an entrepreneur in his own life has suffered or felt the pain point of that situation, which makes him or her think out of the box and want to intervene. So was anything like that happened to you during this journey of before you started?
I think I'll probably share my own story. As you can see, I wear glasses, right? I do remember back in my school days. I was in my 8th, 9th grade, and then I always felt a little hazy in reading the board, but then I always thought it is something else. I never knew about it, right? And then I just switched the benches and sat in the front bench, and I was a front bencher, so in that way I didn't realize. But I happened to just talk to somebody and said, okay, I think you are having a eye power, you may want to get checked. And when I realized that it was almost an year since I had developed a decent amount of eye power, which could have been avoided if I had known a little bit about it, right? So that got me thinking, can we do something that, for any parent, for any kid, right? If there is a stomach pain or a fever, you run to the doctor. But there are a lot of things that are actually underlying diseases, or I wouldn't say underlying conditions, which might be refractive error in your eyes, or a loss of mild loss of hearing, or whatever, that never gets identified, and then it is too late, right? So that got me thinking, okay, can I do something about this? And when I was looking at my own childhood, the health screening in school was more of checking the height and weight, and it stopped there, right? So anybody say school health screening, oh yeah, they do height and weight, and that is like the minimal thing, right? There is a lot more things than height and weight. And in fact, whatever currently we are doing screening, we are almost covering 60 parameters of the body and looking at that and then maintaining the health records. So in that way, it was my personal journey that actually helped me to say that this is something I would like to do.
So again, I'm still with you. So when you say that you've amalgamated or given a confluence of technology into your product, what is that technology expertise that you've actually brought into your product so it stands out from the rest of the health screening systems that are going around in the country? There are a lot of other organizations. So what is the USP that your organization has which makes you stand out from the other organizations?
Perfect. I think that's, in fact, that was one of the themes that I was going to bring up into this whole thing of the entrepreneurial journey, is how do you build your or your service, right? Because otherwise you will be also ran. I think the three things that we have brought in terms of technology is the electronic health records, right? If anybody says, okay, I have gone for a health screening, some doctor came from a hospital or some other unit, they did a screening and did something and then gave a pink slip or a yellow sheet that wrote something, then that gets lost. So the key part that we are bringing is everything is online. So all records are maintained in the cloud, securely accessible only by the parents and the kid, and not by the school, not by anybody else. So that is one of the key things that we are bringing to the table, where the health records are maintained online securely. So that's one technology innovation that we are bringing into the table. Second is, there are lots of things that if you think about a diagnostic lab or something, you go give a blood sample and then they identify that you have diabetes or whatever, a number of things. So we focus on completely non-invasive way of testing, right? That is no prick. None of the kids are pricked even a single needle. And then we work on R&D products, either ourselves, we work with colleges, we work in medical universities, as well as other startup companies who have developed non-invasive devices which can identify conditions which cannot be done through a normal way. So that actually differentiates us in that we have a bunch of patents that we are working on, and a bunch of collaborations with universities and companies that actually helps us to distinguish ourselves. The third thing that we are bringing on table through a technology part is the gamified apps. So imagine a kid is going through a health checkup or a health screening. The kid is really scared. He or she always thinks going to doctor is an injection, and then he is afraid of it. Whereas what we do is completely that the kid goes through a bunch of games that they are playing, and through which we are actually checking their vision, they're checking their audiometry skills, all of those things as games on a tab. So the kid is completely engaged, and then they are liking the entire process, that they are actually looking forward for it. which makes our life much easier and better, in that we're able to identify things better and also record them. So these are three top things that where we are bringing technology for the healthcare.
So, and now we come slowly towards our topic of the day, that what is that financial strain that is required to start off a journey like this? And what is that impetus to give up your job and to invest everything or some of it? So how do you balance it, and what is that minimum balance or a startup requires? Was it your own funding? Did somebody give it to you? So how did you start it off?
Okay, I think that's a very pertinent point, Dr. Raj. I think the key part I would say is, I think as I said in the beginning, right, the entrepreneurship is glamorized a lot, and then people talk about the Flipkarts and the other guys who are actually got valued at 16 billion, 20 billion, doesn't matter, right? But I think the statistics says 90 to 95% startups fail, right? And why they fail? I mean, there are a number of reasons for it, but if you were to look at how to succeed, right, you need to be extremely clear on why you're doing it and what you're doing and what it takes to do it. So if you were to just focus on that aspect of it, it is more of don't expect miracles, right? I mean, don't expect that, okay, I started something and somebody will come and fund me $1 million or whatever that you see on the newspaper, right? It's a long journey, a hard journey. And then I think the key part I would say is, if you don't believe in your own dream, then why will somebody else come and fund it, right? So if you really say that this is something that you are passionate about, you're going to make a change in the way things work, then you should be able to put money where your mouth is, right? As in, like, you probably, it always starts with self-funding, right? And when you say self-funding, it has to be very clear that you need to have some milestones and goals before you start, right? You should say, okay, I mean, it could be a simple amount like 5 lakhs. Okay, I'll say I have 5 lakhs, I have 6 months of runway. I want to see if this idea is something that is even worthwhile, right? And be ready to lose that entire 5 lakhs. Don't go and say, I will borrow 50 lakhs from somebody and start off all over again, hire a bunch of people and then say that, okay, yeah, I burnt all the money, now I don't know what to do, I'm back on the roads, right? It should never be that. You should, I mean, typically they say that entrepreneurs are extremely high risk takers. Actually, the other way around, they are very low risk. I think they want to make sure that the risk that they're taking is very well planned. The right entrepreneurs, I would say, right, is you need to ensure that you have a plan of action and then a goal to say, okay, if I don't succeed by this time, I am not hung up on my idea, right? I mean, I think one thing that our attendees might be interested is, oh, I have an idea, can I get started, right? I mean, if you are thinking about an idea, the similar idea may be being taught by 100+ people all over the world right now, right? So idea is not a business. Idea is just a beginning. It's just a seed of their activity. There's a lot more things that go in before you actually say, yes, this is something I want to do. So there are a few things that has to be looked at before you say, this is something that I want to invest on. And then please have clear goals. Okay, if you don't meet by these days, that you are ready to give up and then start something again. It may not be that, okay, you have to stop your entrepreneurial journey, but then you have to say that, okay, if this is not working, I'm going to pivot to something else which might work. In fact, whatever we are doing right now is actually the 5th idea. We started off in 2018. We changed 5 times before we came to this concept. So the concept is still, we want to help people. We want to help change the healthcare through technology. But internally, what gets done is something that you evolve and then don't get stuck on. So I think that is what I would say, that be prepared for a long journey, but don't get hung up on your idea, and then be ready to change.
And finally, before I move on to the next panelist, one more question is, when you said that before you start out on an idea, there are few things that needs to be taken care of. So if you could highlight few of those few things, I don't want your secret ingredients, but at least something that the kind of audience can actually gain experience before, because there are a lot of entrepreneurs who are wanting to, or people who are wanting to start off their entrepreneurial journey when they're hearing you. And you understand the reason for this webinar is to assist and encourage more people to give employment in a time where getting employment is very difficult. So when you say that there are few things to actually look out, so what are the key points that a person has to keep in mind before implementing an idea? And secondly is, how long does that person persist with that idea? Is there a specific time frame? What is that time frame that a person persists with an idea before moving on to improvising that idea, and or absolutely shun that idea and go on to the next idea?
Sure, I think that's a very, I think that's like the crux of what entrepreneurs should be thinking before they start off. I mean, I think before they even jump the gun and start something, right? I think the two things that I would focus on is look at from the market point of view and then from your personal point of view, right? When I say market point of view, you have some crazy idea. I mean, you would say, I want to do something which is like, okay, I want to have a writable tablet. I'm just putting in it. I mean, it's already there, right? Two things that you want to look at is whether there is a technical feasibility of that. I mean, is it something that can be done technically? It's doable, right? I mean, you don't have to have all the details of how it will be done, etc. But then, is it doable? I mean, can you just make sure that you talk to the experts and get their inputs on, is this doable? And doability is one thing. Second thing is there a market for it? Does somebody want it, right? Are you trying to solve your own problem, or are you trying to solve multiple people which needs to be solved? If it is your own problem, then it is maybe $100 worth only, right? But if it is, if it has to be, then it should be a pain point for multiple people, I would say tech feasibility and market feasibility is something that you need to really look at. Second thing is, in terms of feasibility itself, is it worth doing, right? I can come up with a very crazy product, which is like, yes, there is a market for it, there is a technical feasibility, but what about the financials part? Right? I mean, do I have the wherewithal to actually put 1 crore to build a product which probably 100 people will buy? Right? So these are two things that are from a market point of view. The second thing is, okay, there is a very cool idea. It fits all your technical feasibility, market feasibility, and financial feasibility. But are you the person to do it? Right? Do you have the background? Do you have the expertise or passion to do it? Because without that, it's like, okay, you are going, I mean, completely unprepared. And if you think yes, then I think one most important that I would say is typically a lot of people try and see if they can become individual founders of a company. Try to see if you can get co-founders, as in like you be alone. Try to see if this idea is shared and you have the vision which is common with another person, and then that person brings a complementary skill to you, not necessarily the same skill as what you have. I think these two things are from a personal point of view, whether you have the right background to do it and you have the necessary connections and inputs that you actually do it. These are the two things I would say, Dr. Raj, that will be very important. Without checking these boxes, if you jump in, you're actually jumping into a bottomless pit that you want to just get out at the earliest.
Okay, thank you,
Doctor,
Srini.
I take a liberty, like there is one question from audience, and the question is like, on which extent an entrepreneur should put funds in business despite the business is in loss? And before moving to this question, I'll ask and to Mr. Kanan, understanding entrepreneurship, what does it entail? Just to correlate the words which Srinath ji has given to us, So I just wanted to hear with Mr. Kanan as well.
Yeah, good morning to all of you. So we are all in a very difficult times now, and of course this topic is very appropriate. Coming to India, India has got the largest entrepreneurs in the world. All of you can hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
We are the largest entrepreneurs in the world in terms of number. And if you see where the entrepreneurs are coming from, most of them are in the trade segment, starting from retail, coming up to wholesale, C&F agent, and all that. If you look at the number of people involved in the trade, yeah, there will be more than 3 crore. And apart from that, if you come to SMEs, according to India statistics, there are about 6 crore SMEs employing about 11 crore. So by nature, Indians, we have in our genes to be the entrepreneurs, most of us. So that is one good thing. And again, when you come to entrepreneurship, you talked about entrepreneurship. There are still many businesses where in India you don't require to take any risk. You can divide them into 3 types. One is a business where you don't require to invest much money. In fact, many businesses you may not even require investment. Second is there is some little investment required. Third is where you have to make a lot of investments. Like we heard from Mr. Srinath, there is a new concept and all, you require a lot of investment. So if you talk about entrepreneurs, as I said, the trade is one business where people have made good money without too much of a risk. Trade, you are only making margins. Then coming to, that is how you look at it. Then second is that when you come to entrepreneurship, I believe that this program is being attended by students who are going to come out, those who are having a mid-career, as well as those who are in the late career. So each one has a different type of method by which they raise resources. If you look at students, mostly they are from family, friends, and of course in India, we have almost 60 schemes for startups and MSMEs, covering almost all the areas, you name it. Manufacturing, services, R&D, technology, working capital. There are 60 schemes available. So they can look at all these schemes and see what they can do. Coming to mid-career, as you're all aware, on an average, an Indian employee, they try to save about 30% of their income. On average, I'm saying. Some might save 70, 80. Some might have minus also, because nowadays we have credit cards, we have loans and all that. But on an average, 30%. And if you look at all the Indians together, it's about 18%. 18% of the GDP comes from personal savings. So we have savings. So those who are in the mid-career, generally, they will get into businesses which they understand well as domain experts. And they start with their savings, plus they will start availing loans from MSME, banks. And of course, now we have an entire ecosystem for funding. We have starting from angel funding to private equity, you name it. So if you talk about any type of funding, it is available in India. Similarly, late stage, those who are in the late stage career, in fact, they are real experts. In fact, if you see most of the startups which are coming up in India in the last 3-4 years, most of them, when they say they start a business, big private equity firms come and support them with a large amount of money. Or people with high net worth individuals with lots of amount of money, they say we'll come and back up, we'll start the business. So these are all the methods by which people can raise funds. Coming to entrepreneurship, you talk about entrepreneurship. Whenever you say business, business means a risk. So each one has got a risk appetite, as well as their risk taking ability. So one has to really evaluate what kind of risk they can take. So somebody asked a question, how long you can go on putting money. And Mr. Srinath also mentioned that 95% of startups in India actually they fail. Only 5% have succeeded. When the private equity, they invest in venture capital, they invest in companies. They expect only 2 out of 10 companies to succeed. They don't expect all 10 companies to succeed. So, depending on your financial condition, you have to decide what type of risk you want to take, and also your domain expertise. So based on that, plus also your ability and willingness to raise funds from outside. If you ask me, people always say that small business is very difficult to run. If you take any industry and go and see, the profit as a ratio of revenue is the highest in small business, followed by medium business, and the last is the large business. Small, I will give you a simple example. If you take retail, if you do a small retail, your gross margin is 18%. Most of the time, people don't pay tax, any of that, so they end up with 15% net margin. You take a large retail, very large superstores, so they start with a gross margin of 35%, but their net margin is 1%, 2%, sometimes minus 4, 5%. Take a large e-commerce, uh, at least 90% of e-commerce websites, they make losses. So their gross margin is 65%. Their losses are minus 100 to minus 200%. So you have to decide what is that you want to do. So now what even large companies are doing is they are looking at small formats. For example, Walmart or Future Group. I'll not do it large, I'll do it small. So when you talk about entrepreneurship, first you have to, like Mr. Srinath said, yeah, you have to have purpose, why you want to do that. Second is you have to evaluate whether you have the domain expertise. Third is your risk-taking appetite. And fourth is your financial condition. And based on that, you can decide a business. In India, we have hundreds of businesses where people can make profit without taking much of risk. With this, I'll stop.
Thanks, Mr. Kannan.
Ashish, I want to add one thing here to what Mr. Kannan said. I think he summarized it very well. I just want to add one term that you can remember the attendees is affordable, right? What is the loss that you're able to say I can afford with this venture? Because if 95% of the time it fails, that you're not going to be running out of your food, right? So I think the term that you want to keep in mind is affordable loss. If that should be the term that you should look for. That, I mean, after that, I mean, if it's not working, then do something else.
So Srinath kind of has coined a new terminology, affordable loss. So I'll take it to Mr. Mihir Mehta for this. So he being a chartered accountant, how is he versed or acquainted with this word of affordable loss? And taking on from that, so what is it that when you strategize a new business, when people come to you or you start off a new business or you think of a new business and you look at a book or a financial saving of a person or the fund they have, how do you strategize and how do you actually encourage that person to take that affordable loss?
Sure. Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you, everyone, for hosting me on this. But coming to the term that Mr. Srinath mentioned about affordable loss, I think more than a chartered accountant, because we also run a broking business. Let me give you a term from there, which we call a stop loss. So whenever you place a trade, right, we always say that this could be the target price, and please put this as stop loss. So I think it's absolutely fair. Any trade call which has an upside always has to be, compensated with a limited downside. So a lot of times what happens is when my clients ask me, okay, why this stop loss? It is just an estimation to say that beyond this, if the price falls, you should not be holding it forever. Except for diamonds, I think nothing is forever. But yeah, you kind of have to move on when you see something falling apart. Now, so I completely, as I said, agree with Mr. Srinath. There is a appetite or risk appetite that you have to quantify. Any new entrepreneur has to quantify for himself as to what kind of losses can he bear, seeing his current financial position. Now, to your question about how do we encourage, or if there is someone who's coming with a new idea or something like that, the essential first things first, because we work with a lot of entrepreneurs and helping them raise capital. What we kind of determine is operationally, what is the least amount of capital that you need. Initially, when you're starting, sometimes when some entrepreneurs come to us, they're like, we want to raise this much capital and so on and so forth. And I'm like, where are you going to deploy it? Eventually, it's not just about raising a few $1,000,000. It's about understanding what's going to happen with that capital. Uh, in the initial phases, so today, if someone would come to me with his financial or her financial position, ideally, what I would suggest is that there is an estimation of, so today, if you have a family or if you don't even have a family, you understand what kind of monthly expenses you need as a basic survival kit or whatever terminology you want to use. But the idea is that, say, if I am an individual and I want to initiate a business, but for my current lifestyle or for my day-to-day living or monthly expenses, if the business in the initial phases may not be able to pay me out for that, but I know that, okay, this much money I need on a monthly basis to at least sustain my livelihood properly. Anything over, see, in the initial years, we don't really talk to entrepreneurs about wealth creation because it may be a little scary. Because, the idea in the first few formative years is to talk about, okay, this is a business and this is how I want to shape it. Wealth will follow if the business does well eventually, right? So we try and focus on how can you create a business. It may also happen that in the first, as I said, in the formative years, so about say 2 to 3 years, you will not be able to build wealth out of your business, but you will be still creating value in that business. Say 3 years hence or even later on, you will start seeing profitability and value being created and overall wealth being created out of that business. So, see, the logic is pretty simple. As I mentioned, you need what are the ways operationally that you need least amount of capital, and what is it that you as a person or as an individual, if you have to support your family or something, what is the basic most outlay that you need to allocate to that? And then I would suggest that, okay, look, if there's a business which requires this kind of fund, what are the various sources we can use to raise that kind of fund? So I think that's my thought. And back to you, Dr. Rajesh.
Yeah. So, so when you advise, the question which one of our participants had was that what is that a funder or a strategist look at when they kind of look at a business which has a potential but is not actually living up to its kind of mark and not breaking even, or left alone the profitability side. So when people come to you and look for funders or seek advice when they pitch in front of a funder, what are the key points that you would advise to an entrepreneur before they go in front of a funder to pitch about their product, which is not making much of profit?
Sure. So I'll get to the brass tacks, and if it's a little technical, please let me know. But I think the first thing any ideal investor would look at is the unit economics of the business. What I mean by that is today, see, a business's costs are made up of multiple things: your team's cost, your marketing cost, a lot of other things, rentals, and so on and so forth. But at the unit level, so today, if I'm selling, for instance, an iPhone, at the unit level, do I make money after attributing all the costs to that product? A lot of times, see, investors also appreciate and understand that when you initiate or when you start a business, there is a curve that you follow. So you first obviously you may be loss making because you're trying to, again, it depends on why you loss making also. If, for instance, in certain businesses, like some of the businesses, like, again, if you see Jio, for instance, today, I'm not too sure if I could think of a better example, but Jio's balance sheet may be in red today because they are trying to acquire users by ensuring that they are spending that kind of money on marketing. But once the user is acquired, what's going to happen? Am I going to make money of that user? So unit economics is highly important for an investor, and that should be positive. Second thing I think is scalability of an idea. A lot of times what happens is that, for instance, I'll just give a very simple example: liquor businesses. Liquor businesses have a very difficult time scaling because of heavily regulated environment that exists in that ecosystem. So an investor may appreciate the business, but may be skeptical to get into it if it's not highly scalable. See, today, as Mr. Kannan and Mr. Srinath have also said earlier, it's not necessarily that you require capital to start a business or to even scale it to a certain level. But today, if I'm looking to build a 50, 100 crore business or whatever it is that scalability possible? One another thing that I would definitely bring everyone's attention to is something called addressable market. Uh, so, it is very important. Like today, I'll give you a simple example. Electric vehicles are a big product category in the US, but in India, it's currently not picked up pace because you have alternatives like CNG, LPG. And again, there needs to be a lot of ecosystem push to build electric vehicles as a business in the country. So today, if I launch an electric vehicle startup, an investor might understand or say that, look, the addressable market today is low, but maybe in 10 years or 20 years, when they see enough, potential in the market, that may be a different time to raise capital. So sometimes it is important for an entrepreneur to understand that product, service, or any platform may be slightly ahead of its time, and that may deter an investor. So the reason I'm saying these things is so that, when you are trying to assess your idea, you're assessing it from favorable unit economics perspective, from scalability perspective, from addressable market perspective. Because, if the product, again, as I said, if you came to me with the idea of conducting a business which is completely based on, say, organic foods about 20 years back, I would be highly skeptical because back in the day or 15 years back, organic foods as a mechanism was not very popular. Today, people understand the importance of eating organic food. So today, there is enough education amongst consumers. So I don't need to spend a lot of money to educate that customer that this is why you should eat organic food. So what I'm trying to say is that these are some of the aspects that any ideal investor would look at. So even if you're loss making at the corporate level, but they understand that at unit level you will make profit. It is just a few formative years where you're trying to either acquire users or you're trying to build the foundation of the business. But once that scale is achieved, you will make money. You need to focus on that. And I think just to last comment to top it off is, you have to, even if you may be loss making today, an investor would love to, and again, as an entrepreneur, you have to be highly sure of the same, is that you have to showcase a path to profitability. Eventually, someone should understand that this is how you will achieve profitability in the next, say, 2 to 3 years. Where today, I mean, if you look at Jio's estimates or in their earnings calls, they keep saying that now today they have 400 million subscribers, whereas the total digital penetration is about 600 million. So the idea is that once they will now start monetizing those users with content, with marketplace, with subscriptions, so that in the third year, while they may have spent a lot of money today acquiring customers, but by, say, within 24 months, they will turn profitable because each user will start paying. So that's important that the investor understands how are you going to become profitable. Today you may be loss making, which is okay, but where are you going to achieve that profitability from? So I think these 3 to 4 elements are super critical.
Thank you, Mihir. Mr. Kannan, I had a question for you. You're muted.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of kind of talk about an investor, a venture capitalist, an angel investor, and all of them. When a person is starting out in their journey, they are very clueless as to how to find these funders. We always hear that there are funders available all over, like globally. But how does a journey of an entrepreneur meet with the funder? So where are these funders available? Are there any platforms? So where do these entrepreneurs go to find a funder so that to present their case?
Yeah, if it is tech related, of course, you have a Startup India website is there. And apart apart from that, if you talk about technology, NASCAM also has a separate division where you have all these details. Apart from that, there is a Indian Venture Capital Association is there. So if you go to them, and there are in every city there is a angel network is there. It's very easy. So if you want to find out where they are, just Google it. I think today there are more than hundreds of angel investors are there, and more than 1,500 large investors from abroad have come and invested in India. All these databases are available. In fact, government also makes it available to people. So if you go to the Startup India website, you will get anything related to technology. NASCAM has got all the details. So if you look at how these things are being funded, more than 50% enterprise are what is called B2B, company to company, not retail. Like we have, if you look at Flipkart and Amazon, it's all B2C. So whereas 52% of startups are B2B, like we have heard just now that about health, Mr. Srinath talked about. So he is mainly going to deal with institutions. So it's a B2B kind of thing. So that is where, and plus, since we are talking about creating employment also, so most of the people who have this mid-level and end of the career, they come up with a lot of relationship. So with that relationship, they will be able to find out with which companies they can do business. So if you ask me funding, and most of the times, and then something called open innovation. In open innovation, what happens is again these details are available with the NASCAM and startup. Now more than 50 companies in India, large companies like Hindustan Unilever, Procter and Gamble, so ICICI Bank, HDFC Bank, SBI, they all work with a lot of startups. They work with a lot of startups. It's called open innovation. So you have many sources. Plus now there are a lot of incubation centers in India. If you go to any IIT, they have incubation center. You go to NIT, they have incubation center. So there are incubation centers at academia. So you go to incubation centers, even they'll be able to guide. So there are many sources, and today, well, the internet, it is very easy to find out. Within 10 minutes, overall they're where, and you can send a mail to them. But one thing, since you asked about what type of business people should look at, today in the same business, there are 1,000 companies. Like Mr. Srinath explained, how their company is very unique. They make the child feel that they are playing some game. At the same time, they take all the parameters which are required for testing. So what is that a company is very unique about? Then Mihir talked about scalability. And today you remember that today we are talking about digitization. So whoever is starting a startup, their final goal should be not to just meet the local needs. They should be able to expand beyond their territory in India. In fact, 21% of startups in India, they address the world markets. 21%. So you have to make a plan. Suppose you are starting with Karnataka, in the next 5 years, how you will cover the entire India, then how you can take it global. Especially this medical record as a concept and all, it's relevant all over the world. Of course, there is one concept which is coming up, is called privacy laws. So once you are able to take care of that, then this concept can be adopted worldwide. In fact, this medical record as a concept came 15, 16 years back, but still there's a lot of scope across the world, especially a country like India where the population on the big. So you have to see the scalability and through technology, how you can use technology. In today's world, digitization is going to play a major role. That we realized there is a joke going around. The last 5 years, CEOs tried digitization, it didn't happen. Chief technology officers tried digitization, it didn't happen. COVID-19 came. Now everybody has been forced to adopt digitization. So now it has become the part and parcel of our life. If anyone is planning of a startup, then the digitization piece and scaling up, those two have to be taken into consideration going forward.
So, Mr. Kannan, from what I understand, that a person, only passion of a person to do something is not sufficient enough. He has to be, in the current scenario, has to be technologically sound. He also has to be have a flair for numbers. So does that mean an entrepreneur without the flair for numbers cannot be an entrepreneur?
Now, I can tell you, most of the units are started by technology experts. So 90% of companies fail run by technology experts. So they fail to manage the finance. Finance means in a small company it is working capital. I will give you a simple example about I think in the year 1997. He's an expert in mechanical engineering. He set up shop. He did very well. One unit, he put two more units. Then suddenly one of the raw material suppliers came and told him, you buy bulk for next 6 months, I'll give you 30% discount. For next 6 months he purchased, the time he purchased, the economy started going down. So finally, the business which was running for 5 years very well, just he thought that he was going to save money on buying something at a 30% discount. That killed the business. Of course, today he is a very big IT expert with a visa. He's a very senior guy in a visa. But this is what will happen. So not only technology, whenever you have a startup, what companies have, I was maintaining three startups also, one in filmmaking and one in sports performance, and third one is on healthcare. So one of the things people think is that when they start itself, they have to recruit 30, 40 people, they have to have big office and all that. No, you have to start small, test the concept. Once it is proven, then you have to roll it out on a large scale. So everybody thinks that the money will come. That is the problem of our Indian startups, why they fail. 98% they think from day one they'll be able to mobilize $100 million. No, first you start small. Prove that your concept is unique. It is accepted by people. Then you go and replicate this on a large scale. So that is a model. So they, like I said, they have to give a lot of emphasis on working capital. So then, in fact, the people who succeed well also, they are technologists, but with a lot of focus on finance.
Also, just to, sorry, Dr. Rajesh, I'll just wait for a minute because on the numbers bit, because you said, and I love numbers as a passion. But no, I think just to highlight, it's very crucial, and especially if you're looking to raise capital, it's extremely crucial that you're good with numbers, especially about your business. No one cares if you can multiply 4-digit to 4-digit. No one gives. I mean, no one gives the thing about that. But see, because I'll tell you a very quick instance. So I was working with one of India's leading fashion designers, and we were sitting in a venture capitalist's office, and he gave her a pen and a paper and said that if you start your sale with ₹100, come to the net margin. Tell me every inch of expense and gross margin and everything. And she said, Mir, can you help? And he said, see, it's like if you have zero financial control on your business, Mir is not going to run the business for you. You are the promoter. He's just helping you maybe. So if, you should be knowing what ingredients, where are you spending to the last rupee. I'm a Gujarati, so I obviously, Dhanda, Banya Buddhi comes to us. Somehow it is just in the thing. But I think overall, it's very much, very crucial for any entrepreneur to know the numbers about his or her business to the T.
I agree to it, Mihir. And a question I wanted to ask Srinath, that if a person is not very good with numbers, and also Mr. Kannan kind of mentioned the word mentor. So can a mentor help you in that? Or are there any courses available, an MBA or however, how can someone hone that skill?
I think that's a very pertinent question. Actually, I was going to come and intervene in this aspect, and good that you asked, Dr. Raj. I think the key point is if somebody is from technology background, he or from medical background in a healthcare, right? It sometimes they have a deep expertise of 15, 20 years in a particular area, and then the rest of the things are not something that they understand, and then they are good at their field. I think that is where you need to work with others, right? It is not that you need to have all the answers yourself, but you need to have people who can guide you, whom you can trust and say, this is what can be done. I mean, if you have interest in learning, and as I said, like it could be MBA, even a short-term courses on edX, Coursera, something that you want to learn is perfectly fine. I mean, if you are able to have the appetite for it. If not, there are, as Mr. Kannan said, there are a lot of mentors, a lot of incubators, accelerators who actually give you inputs to help you with some of those things. It may be asking the right question, as Mr. Mihir said. I mean, you cannot expect him to run the business, but to ask the question so that like you come back with the answer. I'm going to run this business. Oh, I have a unit economics of this for my sale. This is for my marketing. This is for my production. At least the questions, the checklist somebody can give that nobody knows the business like the promoter or the co-founder, right? He knows it completely in and out. He or she should be told what questions to be answered before you make those choices. As like, whether just because you're getting 30% discount, do you actually hold up on a particular inventory, or is it something else? All of those aspects, somebody should bring up those questions, and then the founder should actually answer those questions. And any of these things is what can prevent a company from going under, right? Because you have actually prevented it or saved it from going for a loss.
This actually comes kind of gives an idea in my mind. I'll take it back to Ashish. Ashish, your concept of study circle.
Yep.
So doesn't it kind of sound very similar, the mentorship or talking to each other, talking to experts and coming out with answers? Isn't study circle kind of like that, or am I wrong?
You are very much right, doctor. And this is gonna be happen with the whiteboards study circle as well, where we are not saying that you have so much of money or financial background with you. We are going to just monetize the knowledge of individual. This is main motto and basic theme of establishing whiteboard study circle right now.
So can you explain a bit more about this whiteboard study circle, please, for the kind of benefit of the viewers, and also maybe the panelists can also come up with ideas.
Perfect. So what exactly whiteboard circle is going to do, like we are looking for the, or rather than establishing associates who are going to run our online digital platform on behalf of Whiteboard Solutions, where we are giving them the opportunity, all the academia experienced individuals who can associate with us and who can mentor the academic side students who don't have the path or vision in coming future after passing out their campus, that where they are going to be and what is the place gonna be, they gonna be land as an employment.
So every study circle will have a mentor and participants, right?
Not exactly every study circle will have the mentor. Mentor will be directly inbuilt or associated with our whiteboard portal, where they are going to be monetize their knowledge in terms of expertise of their background field or the subject from there they are coming from. And they can be the mentor of the all students who are going to be registered and studying on Whiteboard portal.
So it's a technology-based incubation center.
Yes, virtual incubation center.
Great. So over to the experts. So how do you think we, like Mr. Kannan was saying, and we when I was in IIM Bangalore, we also had an incubation center where the CSR, what was it, Srinath?
NSR cell.
NSR cell, right. So how is it different to be virtually associated with an incubation center? How is it beneficial than a kind of a proper physical incubation center? Mr. Kannan?
Yeah, as I said, today everything is being digitized. As you are all aware, many institutes are going to start this year teaching through internet. They are not going to start the campus. So some of the institutes are already starting from 1st July the courses where students will start attending the classes from the home. And this incubation center is basically what is this incubation center? It is going to give some vocational skills. Since we are talking about graduates who are going to come out, the problem today in India is that everybody who is doing a degree, they want to go for a job. If we have to give a job to everyone, every year 1.25 crore jobs have to be created. So that many jobs are not available, especially after COVID, it will come down still further. So there's only one hope is that people have to start learning how to do their own business. For that, they have to have vocational skill. I believe a company like Whiteboard, they have about 14 courses, finishing courses, covering various types of specializations, where a graduate, if they come, and if they go through that 3-month course, then they are ready for starting a small business or helping a large enterprise. So all that is possible. Today, again, if you talk about employability, what people are saying, whenever students are coming out from the college, they are not ready for the job. They have to be given training for 3 months or 6 months. So to overcome this, what IT companies have done in the last 10 years, they went to the institutes and told them, the last semester, we will recommend a few courses in your college. So the students go through this course. Once they finish, we'll directly absorb them. So from the day one, they are on the job. They are not in training. So something similar, what I think Whiteboard is doing. So when people have done this course for 3-4 months, and when they come out, they are ready to take up a job without going through any training. So that much of training cost will be saved for companies. Or they get the confidence to start their own business on a small scale.
Thank you. So, Ashish, if you could also kind of brief as to how people can join your Whiteboard Labs study circle.
I'm sorry, I did not get you.
I'm asking, how do people register to be part of your study circle?
See, we have what do we call business plan for B2B and B2C, both, where we can approach directly to the student as well as through institution, both. There are certain parameters and commercials involved. If we go to B2B, then there are certain permission from VC end or admin end from institution as well for all the students. And if we talk about B2C, then individual student can approach us and can enroll with us.
Great. So, Mihir, I have a question for you. Mihir, are you there? Okay, maybe.
Yes,
Mihir,
yes, yes.
Yeah.
I just rejoined. Sorry, my battery died. Sorry. Tell me.
No problem. So, Mihir, I have a question for you. That when you advise entrepreneurs to kind of go ahead with their ventures, how important is the marketing cost associated with that product or that business, and what are the ways that you guide a person to use the marketing tool? Because now a lot of things are done digitally. We understand how to use Google, how to use Facebook, we know the geotagging and a lot of other factors. So
Sure.
earlier it was only print media, pamphlet. The things have changed with time. So what amount of cost, or what is the percentage of that budget which one should use periodically on the marketing bit?
Got it. No, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Raj, for the question. So, so I'll answer that in two parts maybe. The first is because now digital ecosystem occupies a larger share of most of, at least when I talk of consumer facing brands. So if a business is consumer facing, there is a larger element of digital acquisition that is happening. So it's very important to understand from a technical perspective that any business which is using a digital ecosystem to acquire customers, the customer acquisition cost has to be somewhere or the other limited to say about one third of the lifetime value that you would. So if I'm acquiring a customer for say one of the products that I'm selling, a t-shirt online, and I'm going to make say $300 out of that customer, I should not be spending more than 80 to 100 rupees acquiring that customer. That's an ideal ratio that I would suggest. Overall, because digital ecosystem has become, see, digitally, it's very difficult to, it's an expensive medium, especially because it's very accessible. So today, obviously, and today more and more time is being spent on digital browsing. So what happens generally is that you may actually end up incurring a lot of costs, but lesser conversions, because digital window shopping, or whatever you want to say, I mean, consumption of content is very high digitally. So what generally happens is that there are high chances where you may attract a customer, but there may not be any sales, or there may not be enough conversions to support that kind of cost. So it is important to understand that ideally at a business level, we do not recommend that your marketing costs overall exceed about 10 to 12% of your revenues. In the initial years, it may be higher, even going up to maybe 25-30% of your revenues, essentially because you're acquiring customers. But I'm saying in the long run, it should settle at about 10 to 12%. And again, in the marketing mix, so today as a business, I'm using offline as well as online channels. Sometimes what happens, and this is what we see, is that online occupies about 80-90% of marketing mixes of some of these consumer-facing companies. But eventuality is that there should be more focus on conversions as well. Today, a lot of times we are seeing companies are just focusing on branding, but not really tracking conversion. So how many customers are converting, seeing those either ads or promotions or something like that. So it's important to track that data and keep it as equitable between offline and online, unless your business is completely online. But if you have a model whereby you're trying to get users from online to offline, like for instance, if I give you an example, Lenskart was an interesting case of online-offline model where they had an online presence as well as offline stores. Obviously, during COVID, it's been impacted, but I'm just saying in a normal situation. So it has to be more or less equitable there, or even if you're some indent towards the online ecosystem, it should not be like 80-20 or 90-10, but try and be equitable there and focus more on conversion.
So I have a question for Srinath and Mihir. This is the kind of continuation of what Mr. Kannan said. That when do you think that a company or your venture is ready to take that big leap to go from locally to nationally and then globally? So without actually, how do you assess and reassess the risk before you take that big leap? Because it requires a lot of investment, a lot of bandwidth, which increase of bandwidth, increase of everything. So when does a person understand that that is the correct time to take that leap? The question is for both of you, if you could take one by one.
Sure. Let me start off first. So I think it's a very pertinent question that you need to see when you are ready to go for the big leap. I think the first thing that I mentioned was, you are going with the basic thing that the model is proven and it works, right? And then as Mr. Kannan talked about, the unit economics is taken care, and then the rest of the things are in place, that you have bandwidth to start off going, if not national, international, just one adjacent market. I think because a lot of time we talk about one trick pony, or like, okay, you work something, it works perfectly in your geography, but your USP that you have, or it might be very specific to your own city or geography. So I would suggest that, okay, you want to first experiment in one other place
I
Hello.
think of
We can't hear Mr. Srinath, I think.
there is some network issue.
Yeah. So Mihir,
Hello.
if you could take it, please. Oh, Srinath
I
is back.
think, yeah, Ms.
Yeah.
Srinath, we lost
I
you.
think I was just said, okay. Oh, I don't know where. I mean, I just thought, okay, I talked about doing in one adjacent market, make sure it works, and then before you go for the bigger one, and then maybe Mihir, you can add your thoughts.
Sure. So, one of the things, I mean, at least on the international, because we do work with businesses who all the time do tell me that, you know, we could open up in US or in some of the Southeast Asian countries. So on the international front, I think one thing that needs to be clearly seen is what is the benefit to the business. See, today, I am working with one of the businesses, for instance, where we realize that today the price realization for that product in the US will be much higher. Now, I need to understand that while the price realization be higher, will the costs also escalate? So, margin plays a very important role in deciding that. Today, if there is enough, first things first, obviously, if there is enough demand where you are already present, or say, if I talk domestic, now today for a product, if there is enough demand in India, I can cater to. Um, if I'm starting, say, business in the US, I need to understand, will I realize better margins because the prices are better and can still service them at the same cost? Or is it that I will get a cheaper cost level or something, some sort of benefit in terms of P&L that is accruing to the business? Second, obviously, is the demand, lack of demand, or if today I have already saturated enough demand in the country or in that particular geography that I'm serving, then it makes absolute sense to look at the next market, because most of the times what we have seen is that the idea again is that go to market, any business going to a new market leads to a lot of spend, whether it be marketing, educating the customers there, getting into the supply chain there, and so on and so forth. You need to back it up with a few cash cows where you've already established your business. So, if I could just take a second and give you the example of some of the businesses, like we deal with Fresh Menu, for instance, is a food business, which I studied closely. Now, they started, for instance, in Bangalore. They made it a cash cow. They ensured that Bangalore, they're numero uno in that space, and then started, expanding into other cities, because they could use that as a cash cow to fund expenses there. So go-to-market does involve expenses, and it's important for an entrepreneur to understand that it should lead to credible either margin expansion, demand expansion, something like that, to get into the new market.
So, if I can just wrap this up by playing a bit of a game, Srinath is the startup guy, Mr. Mihir is his advisor, and Mr. Kannan is the financer. So, Mr. Kannan, if you could chart out that what would you be actually looking into Srinath's business if Srinath wanted funding from you, and what would Mr. Mihir advise Srinath on the financial front before meeting Mr. Kannan? So, can we wrap this series up by doing this interactive session a bit?
I think I would organize a coffee with Mr. Kannan and Mr. Srinath first. I have already met Mr. Kannan, so I'll definitely go for a coffee. But no, I would love for Mr. Kannan to go ahead.
Basically, like we said, startup, no, we always look at three levels of margins. One is gross margin. Of course, even when they start, they should have gross margin. Then you have a EBITDA margin. And third is that profit before tax. So in today's world, uh, earlier and all, people used to say that, okay, as a startup, we can make 5 years to make a profit. But today, disruption in the world is so much. So whatever idea a company comes up with, they have to make a profit within 2 years. So if anybody says they are thinking of making a profit after 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, I am not going to accept. So at the profit before tax level, it should be within 2 years. Now, before that, you have cash flow also. We have 4 levels. Gross margin should always be there even from day one. That is very, very essential. Like Mihir said, a lot of startup costs, marketing costs, all that will be there in the beginning. So when you sell a product, it cannot be below its cost. That is the basic point. But in the cash profit, they should be able to achieve within at least 2 years, and profit before tax within 3 years. So if somebody comes up with that model, then it will be funded. Yeah.
It's that easy.
No, of course, we have to debate all the assumptions
Yeah.
behind the numbers, and see how good they are. Most of the times, plan are made of assumptions. Yeah, in the last 3 months, International Monetary Fund has revised the forecast of world by 3 times, and India's forecast was downgraded by 5 times in the last 3 months.
Yeah.
So still, we are not sure what is the forecast.
So Srinath, what advice would you seek from Mr. Mehta before you approach Mr. Kannan?
I think the key thing I would say is, what Kannan already gave his secret sauce of what he wants to look for. I think my question to Mihir will be, am I doing the right things? Is it the right time to raise the fund? Okay, if it requires some kind of a strategic change and make those things to work right way, and if it means fine-tuning my marketing costs, or maybe should I be improving my operations to make the profit? I think it's like when a company goes IPO, there's a lot more stringent things. When a company goes for a financing option, it's a much minor way, but then it's still the same thing that they're looking for. Why should I put my money into something which I'm not comfortable or which will not grow? But is looking for the returns. So if you're not being able to get those returns, then why should I invest? So I'll be asking Mihir in terms of the right allocations of marketing, finance, operations, and is there something that I can do for making?
Sure.
And Meher, what is the advice that you generally give to your clients before? I'm sure that a lot of people would be coming to you before they actually meet funders.
Yeah, absolutely.
You might be the conduit between the kind of entrepreneur and the funder, and you actually hold a very, very special place for both of them.
They are also funding.
Yeah, yeah. Also funding.
So he is a kind of a person to go to, Srinath. So
yeah, no, so I think we so Dr. Raj, I like to quote this to a lot of people, but I think there are two things I would always say. We are fascinated by MS Excel. I think when I was a kid, I keep getting fascinated by magic tricks. I think Excel is the biggest magical tool you have available on the planet. You can make numbers appear, you can make numbers disappear. It's just the best tool. But coming back to what I would say, I'm sure all of us would have watched Sherlock, and he used to say a very interesting thing, that you do not twist facts to suit theories, you twist theories to suit facts. So I don't twist Excel to, I will twist Excel. I would twist the promoter to suit Excel. A lot of times what happens is people do the reverse thing. They twist their own, vision and everything to suit the Excel. Never do that. Twist the Excel to suit what you're trying to do. So the idea here, what I'm trying to say is that what I would obviously sit with any promoter would be to understand why is he first, as Mr. Srinath absolutely say, why is it that I need the money? What kind of money do I need? Do I need to, it's important to understand that they understand that, see, a lot of times, again, this is just to not to generalize it, but we do see a lot of times that entrepreneurs think that equity money is free money. It isn't. See, when it comes from banks, obviously, aapko wapas dena hai, so you have to pay it back. So otherwise, there's a lot of regulation there. So entrepreneurs seek equity capital because they think, eventually we're taking it. So there's no interest, there's no payback. So it's free. It's not free money. It's maybe costlier than what any debt capital would cost you. But important thing to understand is why are you raising that capital? Is it possible if, like as Mr. Kannan said, if you are going to make profits, are you going to need further capital? It's very important for the entrepreneur to internalize these aspects, that why am I raising this? How will I execute once I raise this? Yes, I have an obligation to that investor, that I have to, obviously build value for him. It's like how any company would build value for a shareholder, and those things. And then we go on to say that, okay, now that you've decided you want to operationally, so sometimes we also see that, companies come to us saying that, look, I want to raise $10 million. I ask them, okay, what are you going to do with it? And they say, they give me a nice looking Excel saying, like, okay, 5 years, this is what is going to happen. I'm like, for this, you're going to need 1,000-member team to execute. Today, you are running with a 5-member team. Do you think you will find those 1,000 people to hire in the first year or 2 years? And they're like, nahin, wo to milega nahi. This Excel is just what you enter. It's like input, output, right? So I'm just saying that it's important for the entrepreneur to internalize what he's trying to say, and then use Excel to build that vision.
So once you're coming to an end, let's kind of have a closing remark from all the panelists and the questions which I want them to actually highlight on is, should one become an entrepreneur in this current scenario? Secondly is, because I think Mr. Kannan has been the encourager in among the panelists. Other two have been the devil's advocate as to tread carefully. The second one is, what are the areas of scalability? And third is, how much, again, it's a closing note. I know we have covered it. How long should one wait till the person actually decides, well, this is the one, or we move on to another idea of us? So if we can take it one by one, and then we'll close it.
I'll go last, Raja, because I want to share something. So let Kannan and Mihir.
So Mr. Kannan, could you please start?
See, if you ask whether this is the right time for startup, I can tell you that many of my friends started with supplying all these medical devices required for COVID. I was surprised the kind of WhatsApp I am getting. At least 20 of my friends have started this business. So even in this crisis, there is an opportunity. But if you, in general, where this is the right time, maybe this is not the right time. Once the COVID is over, that is the time to start. So this is the time to plan what people can do, what are your strengths, weakness, what funds you have, and where you can raise. So somebody can think about all these and create a mind map of what they can do. And once that is over, take the help of people like Mihir, prepare a plan and raise the funds and start the business. That's what I have to say.
Mr. Mihir?
Sure. No, I completely agree with Mr. Kannan. I think this is a great time to, every crisis is an opportunity, and it's one of the best times to start a business because, obviously, you have to pick your battles and not try and see. Eventually, the idea is today, anything which leads to a lot of education needs a lot of money, and then that's a bit of a challenge. But today, I'm just giving a simple example. Like one of the things we've been discussing is how education has completely been disrupted, and kids are now learning everything digitally, and this will now stay for a while. Now today, my mom, dad have started ordering things online, and this is going to stay because they've learned it. So earlier, if my mother would want to pick her groceries, going to the market, now she's okay if it comes via vendor, digitally. So you have to pick your values and understand what the behavior eventually either consumer or of the business is, and do that. And to your last question of on how long, I think as Mr. Srinath pointed out at the very beginning, you kind of go on. We always, as I said, have a stop loss to everything. So today, if you realize as an entrepreneur, because a lot of times what happens, you're right, and even Mr. Srinath said, people stick around just because you don't know whether you've hit the point of exit. But yes, as important as entry, equally important is exit at the right time if things are not working well. So it's important when you've hit that point where you are just feeling money into the business and maybe mentors and it's very important a third eye is there to look at the business because it's like if I build a product, I will always love it because I have built it. But you need a third eye to tell you that okay, these are the two things that you need to. So this is not the best time. So I think it's very important to keep connecting to neutral third parties. And I would rather suggest not even your investors because they also have a vested interest, but someone completely different who will be able to point it out to you and show you the mirror and be like, okay, this is what may be going wrong and this is the right time to maybe exit.
And take the criticism positively.
Absolutely.
So Srinath.
Yeah, I just thought I'll do a little differently. I'll just share a simple slide which kind of summarizes all these thoughts. Let me know if you're able to see the screen.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Share.
Is it share now?
Organizer has to allow you.
No.
No. Ashish, if you could help him.
I have already allowed him in the beginning itself.
Srinath, we can't see your screen.
Okay, sorry, I had not pressed the share button. Sorry,
Yeah.
my bad.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do
Now
you see the screen? Yeah. So I just put together these 4 slides just to say all that we talked about. I think it will be a good summary for everybody.
Can you just put it on full
just say
screen?
funding your dream. Yeah, it's in full screen, right? Okay. So I think the first question that we about is which dream to fund, and then I think even here talked about is it like okay, I mean, don't just go with your approach or a investor. I mean, like, go for a neutral inputs and see all of these things we talked about. I mean, the feasibility, financially, technically, and market, and then whether you want to do it and whether you have the right contacts. That is something that I would say which dream to fund, and then who can fund, right? We talked about various options. We have Startup India, we have debt options, we have incubators like NSR Cell, or a lot of companies run their own accelerators. And we have angel investors who can give both angel funding as well as seed funding. And then we have VCs and PE firms. I think, but all of them is more like, okay, first you need to believe in your own dream and then make it so that it works, rather than just assuming that somebody will just come and fund it just because you have a cool idea. Cool idea is, I think, only a cool idea. I mean, it's only when you see the execution when people will be ready to fund it. And then why they fund it, right? So what is that they actually look forward? So the thing that they look forward is how is a team? What is that your background and your references, and then how you are all in a chemistry for yours, and whether you have a sustainable USP. I mean, this is what we talked about. Whether you have innovations, and then whether it might be patents, it could be business models, which is sustainable, right? Not just a intermediate thing that you have. And then how the market itself opening up, and whether it is international market or a local market, and then how is your ability to scale up? Whether you have the wherewithal to do it, one operation, multiple geographies, and then whether you have done the due diligence from what Mihir actually can help us out with, whether it's all in a place that we can make it happen. And finally, they look for what they get from the funding, whether it is the equity, it could be debt, it could be some kind of comfort, it could be board options, different voting rights. So all of this is what they look for when somebody wants to fund, right? So this, I just wanted to say, this is what probably summarized what we talked about today. And also want to see if we can, if somebody is thinking, okay, man, I think this is a good session and I know that I really want to start off and I'm interested in making impact for the society. I just want to have one slide that talks about, and then it's actually a segue to the next session that maybe Ashish will talk about, is if you are looking at what is that you want to help on, I just wanted to see, just to see what is social entrepreneurship and what are the areas in which you can actually try and contribute, where you can make a difference to the society, or as well as build a career and entrepreneurship options. So I'm just not going to go with individual things. You can look it on the screen here, but I think this will give you a high idea of if you are looking at a social entrepreneurship, these are the areas that you can focus on and talk about that. Raj,
Thanks,
Ashish,
Srinath. Brilliant way of summarizing everything. Ashish, just before we end, there's a question which, will this session be available on YouTube or any on the social media so people can refer it later? And are we kind of providing people with these, the PPTs which Srinath just shared with our participants? So if you could take that question for me.
Thank you, Doctor. Yes, surely we are going to be upload on several social media platform of all our webinar recording very soon. We are into the process of that. And yes, after this session, there will be handouts for all the attendees. Surely we will gonna be circulate among them. And I take 1 minute more to take the liberty, the announcement of that. Whiteboard Lab has 150 courses for students as well as professionals. Secondly, Whiteboard Lab also provides startup entrepreneurship training as a part of their product profile. There were 2 announcements from our side. One was 150 course we have on Whiteboard Lab portal, as well as we do provide training for a startup and entrepreneurship. And yes, Doctor, we are going to be circulating all the keynotes, handouts with all the attendees, and all the recording will be available on YouTube and will be circulated on their respective email IDs, WhatsApp groups, everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashish. So I come to the end of this webinar. We had a wonderful, wonderful learning. I learned a lot from you guys. So thanks, Srinath. Thanks, Mihir. Thanks, Mr. Kannan, for being part of our webinar. Thanks, Ashish, for arranging this brilliantly.
Thank you.
I thank all the participants, the audience, to be very patient, and I hope that you've learned something. And there are a lot of takeaways from this session. And I thank all of you for joining in. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Mr.
Thanks, folks.
Nice to meet you all. Yeah.